Okay, so I just finished my first anime show and it was really good. Let's talk about it. So Frieren. There is a lot to talk about with Frieren. They bring up a lot of interesting religious questions. They have really interesting characters. They talk about life. There's a lot to take home from this show. I like movies and TV shows that give me something to take home, that give me something to think about and learn and apply to my life. I'm generally just not interested in movies and TV shows that meaningless action or just a bunch of mind games and puzzles. I like good characters, good stories, and meaningful lessons. Thankfully, Frieren has a lot of this. Let's talk about the story. The story is that Frieren went on a 10-year-long journey with some adventurers, and then at the end of the journey, she just says goodbye and leaves. 50 years later, one of her adventuring buddies dies, and she realizes that she didn't know him very well, and she didn't spend any time getting to know him. So then the story revolves around her traveling to heaven so that she can speak with his dead soul and reconcile with that. That is a really cool story. The story is deeply tied with Frieren's character, and I like that a lot. The whole lesson of Frieren is that she's learning to appreciate small things, in particular people in her life. Frieren is an elf, and she lives thousands of years, and so she just doesn't value anything that lives shorter than she does.
I'm going to keep traveling.
All by yourself?
It's easier that way.
You're not going to take on an apprentice? A journey is better with someone to talk to.
I fear it would be a waste of time. No matter how much I teach them, they'll surely die.
How cheery. That's not how relationships work.
That's how they work for me.
She's learning to value people and things that are relatively insignificant to her life. I really like that the thrust of the whole story is very personal to her. She's not trying to save the world. She's not trying to save the universe. Frieren as a character is very soft-spoken, very subtle. She's very apathetic, but she's learning not to be. She's bad at reading people's feelings, but she's learning how to be better at reading people's feelings. She's not very good at showing appreciation for other people, and so she's learning how to do that. The whole head patting thing is indicative of Frieren trying to show affection toward people. Appreciate and value the people in your life while you have them. That's something that all of us can learn. There's a part of an episode where she loses a ring, and she had gotten the ring from Himmel. Frieren is about to give up looking for the ring, and then Fern convinces her that it's actually important. And I think this little event captures what Frieren is learning throughout the whole season. She's learning to value small things. In the last episode, Frieren has a conversation, and it really articulates the whole lesson of the season.
Thing is, if Himmel the hero hadn't visited my village, I doubt that my home would still be around whether he had saved the world or not.
Right. And all that to say...
that the small stuff counts just as much.
So the lesson is that small things are just as important as the big things. And that's what Frieren is struggling with throughout the whole season. She's learning to value small things as much as big things. Learning to value things that might be considered insignificant but are actually important in her relationships with people. Let's talk about the magic test that she goes through. Frieren is told that she has to be accompanied by a registered first-class mage in order to access the Northern Plateau. I'm not a huge fan of this story beat because it just feels like it was lifted out of a video game. But in any case, it happens. Okay, so Frieren and Fern are entering into a dungeon and they have to get to the end of the dungeon in order to pass the test. Some of the dangers in this dungeon are mimics. They perfectly mimic the people who enter into the dungeon with their powers and abilities. And right at the end, the final boss, if you will, is Frieren. And Frieren, being one of the most powerful mages in existence, is obviously the only one who can compete with herself.
It's behaving just like Mistress Frieren predicted.
We can't afford to think about Fern. After all, no one knows better than I do how frightening I can be.
This actually captures, I think, an important theme. Frieren's greatest enemy is herself, whether in terms of magic or personal growth. And in the same way that Fern had to point out a flaw in Frieren's magic, Fern also pointed out a flaw in Frieren's personal growth. She points out that simply trying to get to know people is important. And the only way that Frieren could overcome herself, her greatest enemy, is with help from her friends. So Frieren's battle with her mimic captures, I think, an important theme of the story. The cinematography is also really good. They include really interesting B-roll shots that just add a lot of flavor to the scenes.
Being remembered is something we all selfishly desire.
You're right. And how does heaven play into that picture?
Characters have quirky little gestures that offer a lot of personality. And the music's awesome. You have a lot of very calm, very soothing, upbeat music, and the battle music is also very appropriate. It's these quick strings and flutes.
He figured out the weakness of defensive magic. Fern, you know what to do, don't you?
Yes, I remember from our practices.
Then I'm going to ask that you protect me as well.
Let's talk about religion in Frieren. There is an interesting theme throughout the season, which is religion is convenient.
What are you doing?
Praying, of course.
We return to nothing when we die.
I like to think we go to heaven. But even if a heaven doesn't exist, I very much believe that it should.
Why's that?
I feel it's more convenient that way. Those that kept living despite life's hardships deserve more than just oblivion. Picture the alternative. A heavenly realm where souls can live in luxury. It's a nice thought.
Good point. That is more convenient. Let's pray.
Let's.
Let's look at some modern psychological research. So there's this book called How God Works, The Science Behind the Benefits of Religion. I actually made a video about this book. Let's read a few passages from it. Many studies have explored whether belief in God reduces anxiety about death, and the consensus is that it does. By combining the results of 100 different studies, researchers found an intriguing pattern. In general, as religious faith goes up, unease about death goes down. So this author includes a lot of studies showing the practicality of religion, the convenience, if you will, of religion. And I won't get into that in this video, but you can go and watch my old video. Here's an interesting commentary from the author, who is kind of an agnostic atheist. Of course, I don't know what happens after death, or which, if any, religions have it right. But the idea that our consciousness lives on makes death feel less like an extinction and more like a transition. And religions excel at helping people make transitions. Believing in a divine being or force who created what's on the other side of the ultimate threshold makes the transition easier. In psychological terms, I see no reason to fight such beliefs. None of us know whether there's an afterlife. But we do know that the prospect of one would bring some peace of mind for believers. So why not believe? In some ways, you might be unnecessarily torturing yourself if you don't. The only reason to avoid a belief in the afterlife would be if holding one caused some harm in the here and now. Though some prominent atheists have argued that such is the case, the data doesn't support this argument. So I think it's really interesting that Frieren decided to focus on the convenience of religion rather than the truthhood. Because that's actually a really interesting conversation, is the convenience of religion. So that's all I have for you today. Frieren has some really great character development, some interesting conversations about religion, and I really think it's worth watching. Hit the button, hit the bell. Catch you later.